To have and have not movie review. So I've been on a bit of a Humphrey Bogart old movie kick lately, and this was the next movie in my video store that was an old Humphrey Bogart movie. This is a 1944 movie and yet another movie that has Humphrey Bogart opposite Lauren Bacall. Again, I've previously reviewed The Big Sleep, in which they co-starred opposite each other, and Key Largo, in which they co-starred opposite each other, and then this one, To Have and Have Not, in which they co-star opposite each other. This is an interesting one. There's a lot of kind of political baggage or kind of literary history behind this movie. It was based on a novel or short story, I forget which one, by Ernest Hemingway. And it was adapted into a screenplay by William Faulkner, like the William Faulkner, the one you read about in high school English class. A little bit of kind of sometimes forgotten trivia. William Faulkner had a Hollywood stage in his career where he was employed as a screenwriter. And according to Wikipedia, I think this is the only time in film history where one person who had a Nobel Prize for literature wrote a screenplay based on the book of another person who had a Nobel Prize for literature. So it's the only time in which two people which have had a Nobel Prize for literature have collaborated on the same story. So, yeah, that makes this interesting, doesn't it? Now, I'm finding that at this point, having watched a bunch of these Humphrey Bogart movies together, it's wearing a little bit thin. He's kind of always playing the same character. I think maybe that's my fault for kind of watching them all in the same week. You know, if I would have spaced them out a little bit more, it probably would have been a lot less noticeable. But once again, Humphrey Bogart is playing a reluctant hero who doesn't want to get involved in any trouble, but is eventually forced by circumstances to act on it. In other words, he's playing the exact same guy he played in Key Largo and Casablanca. Actually, speaking of Casablanca, there are a lot of parallels to Casablanca. Both films take place, both Casablanca and this one, To Have and Have Not, take place in a French colony during World War II, in which there's a political vacuum left by the capitulation of Paris, which results in struggles between the Vichy regime and the Free French forces. Incidentally, both films were actually filmed during World War II, so this was actually, when this film was made, this was contemporary. And actually, not only Bogart, but one of his co-stars, Marcel Dalio, who was a French actor who appeared in a number of Hollywood films during this period, he was also in Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart. So that's another connection. Unfortunately, I think these connections sort of make To Have and Have Not suffer a little bit, because you want to compare it to Casablanca because there's so much similar in terms of like the setting and the plot, and it's not as good, but it's good for what it is. A couple other random thoughts, and I'm going to put these in no particular order. One, so anyone remember that Coen Brothers movie Barton Fink, which was kind of a satire on Hollywood during this period? There was a character in there who was meant to be a satire on William Faulkner's Hollywood period. And there's a part in that movie when Barton Fink was talking to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend was explaining his method. And I'm not going to quote it exactly because I'm quoting it from memory, but she says something to the effect of, the formula that he always has to follow in this movie is there's a hero, and the hero's protecting somebody. And either it's like a girl, or it's a child, or sometimes she says it's like a man-child he has to protect. And she says the studio kind of hates it when he does the man-child thing. I'm probably mangling that quote because this is all from memory. But I'm wondering if that was based on this movie, because in this movie, Humphrey Bogart's character is protecting kind of like a mentally impaired man. And it's a guy named Eddie who seems to fit the bill exactly. The other characters call him Rummy, which is, I don't know, some sort of old slang. He's portrayed, I don't know exactly what he's portrayed as, some sort of mental impairment. Autism, I don't know. For one reason or another, Humphrey Bogart has taken Eddie under his wing and is constantly having to get him out of trouble or protect him from the other people. Now, I have nothing against people who have mental impairments. What's the correct term for this? I have nothing against these type of people, but you cringe a little bit when they're in a movie script like this because it's being played for laughs a bit. It's kind of played for comic relief. So it's embarrassing to watch, and it's also not funny. It's almost kind of like Jar Jar Binks in the sense that there'd be some sort of dramatic scene, and then Eddie will just come in with his childlike ramblings and kind of disrupt the drama. Yeah, okay, so that's point number one. Point number two, again, kind of going off of random points. This film, if you look on Wikipedia, or in my case, I got this off of the DVD extras. There was an interesting making of extra, which was included in the DVD I rented. It's got some interesting political baggage on it. The original novel by Hemingway dealt with the conflict between the Cuban rebels, and it was a novel about revolution in Cuba. It came out in 1944, so during World War II, and President Roosevelt was horrified about the movie studio making a film about rebellion in Cuba because Cuba was our ally at the time. Because Cuba didn't, of course, become our enemy until after Castro's revolution in, when was that, 1959? So in 1944, Cuba was still ruled by a friendly regime. And Roosevelt threatened the studio with having its export license revoked until they changed the setting of the movie. So he essentially forced the studio, direct government intervention, to change the whole setting. So that's why they changed it to like an island under Vichy France. Now, to be clear, artistically, I don't think this movie suffers at all from that change. In fact, maybe it even works better because, you know, the fight against fascism in Vichy France was, that was the issue of the day. Again, this film coming out in 1944. So, yeah, why not? Well, why not have it about the struggle against fascism? Yet at the same time, it's disturbing to see these examples of direct government censorship. And, you know, you watch Hollywood movies, and you wonder why they have such kind of a narrow ideological outlook. And this is why. How many times do you think similar issues have occurred? And how many times do you think that the studios themselves have not even bothered to film certain scripts or to write certain scripts because they knew it was going to get government reaction, so then the studios start self-censoring. And this is why, unfortunately, American movies kind of do not have a wide range of political viewpoints advocated in them, which goes into the manufacturing of consent and why there's such kind of a narrow political outlook in America. Okay, rant over. It's something disturbing, but it's some interesting history to this movie. Moving on to point number 3, just kind of interesting points about this movie in no particular order. According to Wikipedia, this film has one of the most famous lines in film history, which is, quote, Lauren Bacall says this line. She says, "You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow." It sounds a lot more sexy when she says it. But that's the line. Now, I heard that, or I heard that in the movie, did not make a particular impression on me. Read that on Wikipedia, and I thought, is that famous? I've never heard that before. But you know, it's funny, it's one of those things, after you have your attention drawn to something, you start noticing it when it pops up all over. And so since then, I've started noticing like this line pops up at various places. In fact, at one point, this even got me a point in a pub quiz at a bar. I think the question was, what movie is this line from? Was part of a pop quiz pub quiz at a bar I was in, and I was like, I know that, to have and have not. So yeah, extra little bit of trivia for you that, who knows, that might pop up in a trivia night somewhere. Now, exactly why that line is so famous, I don't know. I'm a little bit embarrassed to speculate because I've never heard anyone say it's a sexual innuendo. And yet, I guess that would be the obvious explanation, right? Because it is a sexual innuendo. And I guess because this was 1944, you think, ooh, 1944, they were already getting away with it back then. Or is that another reason that this line became so popular? Or is it just the obvious reason that it's some sort of sexual innuendo? Let me know if I'm missing anything. Or actually, maybe don't. Maybe we can skip that conversation. Let me know if you have any thoughts about the artistic merit of this film. Yeah, I'll just finish here.